Okay, so for full-time 40-hour work weeks, $5.25 a month. And obviously, if you want to do anything in prison, if you want to have toothpaste, a toothbrush, deodorant, the basics of personal hygiene when you're living virtually on top of thousands of other men, then you need more than $5 a month. And so what do people do? Well, they hustle, right? They develop hustles. And I gotta tell you, there is not a single concept that you would learn at Wharton or Harvard Business School or Columbia Business School down the street that you couldn't learn inside federal prison. Whether you're talking about territorial expansion, or new product launch, or quality control, or supply chain management, or risk management, or barriers to entry, they understand every single one of these concepts. They intuitively get it from their careers as mostly successful drug dealers. They use somewhat different lingo in explaining them, but they understand all of it. And when I was about a week into my time at the warehouse, the warehouse was considered both the best and the worst job on the compound. It was the worst job for obvious reasons. You were moving 40,000 pounds of food a day, and the meat all came in 80-pound boxes, and the rice, the beans, the flour, and the sugar came in 100-pound bags. And since I went in at 117, that was not easy. But it was the best job in prison too, because bodybuilding is so central to prison culture. The food is so bad, and it's just tons of starch to fill you up. And so if you have access to actual protein or fresh anything, then it's worth a lot back on the yard. So a week into my time, another dude pulled me aside. He said, look, you better start stealing, because they're about to plant raw meat in your freezer jacket today. And I'm like, what? Why would they do that? And what does that mean? Why? And they said, look, raw meat, that'll get you, that'll get you another charge. It'll get you a fresh charge, it'll get you put in solitary, and it'll get you moved to a high security prison, because raw meat, the penalty for stealing raw meat in prison is like inciting a riot. Why? Because it can get E. coli if not stored correctly and kill 100 people on a yard. So I said, why would they do that to me? And the guy said, because they figure you're a rat, because you're the only one not stealing. And so that day, very surreptitiously, I got 2 green peppers and an onion, and I saran wrapped them to my chest. Stuffed 2 bananas, 1 in each sock. I got back to the yard, and when the 7 of us got back, I slowly unsheathed my booty from the day and said, what's up? And the dude on the far right, he said, damn. He said, the Senate of the embezzling. And that episode, it taught me more than just about, it was more than just kind of a way that I, at least temporarily, kept myself safe from going to solitary, which wasn't anything I ever wanted to do. Especially because in prison, it's not like on the outside when if your boss has to keep you late one night, you can just send an email home. No. When you go to solitary, you disappear. You can't call your parents and be like, hey, don't come and see me this weekend, I'm going to be in solitary. It's just you're gone. No one knows where you are. And no one has any way to let your loved ones know. And so, anyway, that introduced me, though, to the defining feature of prison life, which, as I said, is ingenuity, and especially entrepreneurial ingenuity. Prison was teeming with guys whose entrepreneurial and business instincts were just as sharp as those of the CEOs who had wined and dined me 6 months earlier when I was a senator. There was a guy named BJ. If you'll indulge me for a minute, I'll tell you about BJ. He lived next to me in my cell block, and he had big plans for the future when he got out. He was going to merge his 2 passions into one entrepreneurial vision, and he'd already paid $10,000 to start a website that featured exclusively beautiful redheads having sex on top of classic luxury sports cars. And he'd appointed his 19-year-old son to be the vice president of talent development. His 19-year-old son was auditioning women, sending in pictures. He was approving them or not approving them. And this guy was running a whole successful business from the inside. Now, I tell that story, it's kind of a lurid example and it's kind of humorous, but but I tell it because it's indicative of what so many other men, their capacities, their capabilities, and their just incredible sort of entrepreneurial spirit and hustle that even prison couldn't extinguish. Unfortunately, there was no preparation at all to help people turn their intuitive grasp of these business concepts into a legitimate enterprise. There was almost no education. The whole year that I was there was one GED course that was taught by a prisoner who didn't take it seriously and just met for 5 minutes once a week and then let everybody go, and the prison didn't care. Then there was a course on hydroponics, 2 weeks on how to grow tomatoes in water, right? Because what better prepares you for successful reentry than being able to grow some tomatoes in water? And third, there was a computer course, which I'll never forget. It was a pre-release course that you had to take about 6 weeks before you got out. And they sent you to a room. There was a room with 12 computers, brand sparkling new computers. And we had salivated at these for the whole time I was there. Most of these guys had never been on a computer in their life because they were doing, most of them had 15. They had 10 for mandatory minimum. And they had a gun on their case, so they had 5 more. So a lot of them had 15. Some had 16 or 17 because they had an enhancement for being near a school or a park or something. So most of these guys had never sat down at a computer. So we get in this room, there's 12 of us. They tell us to sign the form, saying that we had taken the class. We sign the form, we sit at our 12 computers. CO says, all right, see that button on the bottom right? Push that, that'll turn it on. We all turn it on. Silence for about 90 seconds. Guy a couple seats away from me says, he's playing with the mouse, and he says, yo, CO, if I shut the fuck up. So it's about 35 minutes of silence. And then the CO says, all right, you remember that little button on the bottom right? We'll push it again. Push it again. He said, y'all are dismissed. Get back in your cell. Get out of here. And we all walked back to our cell, but you know what? FCI Manchester could get their stipend from the federal government because 12 new pre-release prisoners had just completed their computer skills class. So, as you guys know, every year about 650,000 people come back to our doorsteps and come back to the same communities where they failed once before, only now they've got the added stigma of prison records. And 9 out of every 10 employers perform criminal background checks. 4 out of every 5 landlords perform criminal background checks and won't hire or rent to someone with a record. When you come out, in addition to the fees, fines, maybe child support arrears you already owe, now you got to pay for your halfway house room, you got to pay for your drug testing, you've got to figure out a way to find money for transportation, you got to find a way to get clothes. Because you literally come out with the clothes on your back. And you need clothes for a job interview. It shouldn't surprise anyone that 3 out of 4 people will reoffend within 5 years. It should surprise us that 1 out of every 4 somehow overcomes these obstacles. Prison education can change this. We know that, okay? We know that the RAND Corporation, one of the most prestigious research institutes in the country, did a meta-study, which means they studied dozens of other studies of prison education programs around the country, and they showed a 43% reduction in recidivism for prisoners who advance educationally while they're incarcerated. Denmark has figured this out. You know what the recidivism rate in Denmark is? About 14%. Okay, so about a 5th R rate. You know why? Because when you come in, they do an intake, they figure out what are your skills, and once they've assessed your talents, then they look at the employers in the community to which you'll return, and they try to figure out a way to best align your aptitudes with the needs in your community, and that's the focus of your time while you're incarcerated. And so their rate of reoffenses isn't much different from the rate that just the chance a random person has of offending. But only when society stops seeing prisoners as society's throwaways and starts seeing them as human beings worthy of a second chance, worthy of some financial and intellectual and spiritual investment, will we ever muster the political will to make this a reality. Another way that we know we can reduce recidivism is by facilitating prisoners' ability to stay in contact with their loved ones. So what do we do in this country? Well, up until 2 weeks ago or a week ago, when the FCC finally ruled that you couldn't do it, prison phone companies charged as much as $14 a minute. Okay, and on average, about $1.50 a minute where I was to stay in touch with people. When you're making $5, 25 cents a month, and you got to pay for your own toothpaste and soap, how much money are you going to have left over to talk to your loved ones? I'll tell you, one of the most heartbreaking things I saw while I was there was just watching guys try to call home. They'd been saving all month to get 2 minutes, and then they talk, and and then the child's mom is on the phone and says, well, it gives them some grief for 60 seconds or 90 seconds, so much time that by the time their kid gets on the phone cuts off. And they barely even have a chance to say hello, if that. The only thing more heartbreaking than that is watching a kid cling to their parent at the end of visiting hours and not understand that they can't stay. When you consider not just this, but the many ways, and the other way that we don't talk about much because it's taboo, that prison encourages recidivism, is our tolerance of rape culture inside of prison. There's more rapes inside of our prisons every year than there are outside in the whole country every year. That's crazy, isn't it? 2.2 million people versus 300 plus million, and more rapes on the inside than on the outside every year. And you know what we do? How do we respond to that as a country? Well, we laugh about it. Because if you watch CSI or Law and Order, when the guy's going to prison, what does the detective say, or the prosecutor? Hey, well, don't drop the soap in there. It's real funny. It's also real short-sighted. Because disproportionately, we know that many of the same men who are raped or repeatedly raped or gang raped inside of prison come out and tragically attempt to reclaim their manhood in the same violent way that they believe it was taken from them on the inside. So there's so many ways, in which prison actually encourages recidivism. And yet, what I found there was, whether you're talking about BJ and his successful website business, or the many guys who I would tutor for their GEDs or help put together a resume and were fixated on what they were going to do to succeed when they came home so they never had to come back. Or whether you're talking about the two men that got into bed together every night for the last 4 months I was there, just to hold each other, to have some intimacy. What I saw in prison was an unbelievable triumph of the human spirit in an environment that does everything it can to take that away. Anyone who's ever been locked up understands how dehumanizing it can be. But the fact that so many people figure out a way to overcome that, despite this terribly dehumanizing environment, should remind everyone not to just write off 2.2 million people as if there's so much refuse. Look, I had every possible... You guys do Reentry. That's why you're here. God bless you. Look, I had every single advantage when I came out. I had financial savings. I had 300 references, basically. 300 people wrote letters to the judge requesting clemency that I not go to prison, including the Attorney General of Missouri, the Lieutenant Governor, the Mayor of St. Louis, State Senate President, House Speaker. I wasn't there very long. I was only there a year and a day, shortest of just about anybody where I was. I didn't sustain any great psychological or physical trauma while I was locked up. And I'm white. Oh, and I have a PhD from a top university. Compared to the guys that I was locked up with, most people of color, when I was working with them on their resumes, not a single person currently employed they could put down as a reference. I sat and did it with one guy. He put his uncle down. I said, "What's your uncle do?" He said, he used to do odd jobs. I said, "Did he ever have like an employer, like who he said, "Well, I don't know." Do you know how heartbreaking it is to explain to someone that you can't put your uncle, who's never had a formal employer, as your reference?
That's right.
I had every possible advantage relative to the guys I was locked up with. And I had a really hard time finding a decent job. I was in my first job interview to consult for an affordable housing group in Missouri. I came back, I met with the board, I answered all their questions. Then the chair of the board, she says to me, look, we want 4 things. We want someone who can raise money. We know you can do that. You raise millions of dollars as a politician. We want someone who can build a grassroots advocacy organization around the state. We know you can do that. We want someone who understands the policy. We know you get that. And we want someone with connections in Jeff City. We know you've got that. You got everything we need. But why should we be the group to take a chance and take the hit for hiring you? Because we know the day we hire you, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is going to have a front page story saying, Missouri Workforce Housing Association hires convicted felon. Why shouldn't we just let some other group hire you, and then we'll hire you in 6 months or 12 months once they take the hit? Why do we need that stench on us? If it was this hard for me, imagine how hard it is for everyone else. The president, I'll close by just saying the president, in some respects, is doing a great service to the country by visiting a prison and by highlighting these issues. In other respects, I don't agree with his rhetoric. The way that he continues to delineate between nonviolent offenders good and violent offenders bad isn't going to solve mass incarceration, because 90% of the people who are locked up in this country are there for some type of violent offense, about 85%. So I wish he wouldn't do that. But he made a powerful statement when he went to that prison in Oklahoma, and he made an even more powerful statement at the end when they asked him what he took away from it, and he said, I took away the fact that I made some of the same mistakes that these guys made, and you know what? Because of my upbringing, I had a cushion. I had a margin for error. But you know what? That could have been me. And until we as a society start thinking, that could be my dad, that could be my son, that could be my daughter, that could be me, we won't muster the political will to treat people on the inside in a civilized and humane way that will help them be civilized humans when they come out. Thank you very much. That was my girlfriend when I went in, and she stayed with me. Unlike most guys in there, I didn't have that long, and so someone stayed with me. But that's not the case for most people. And they all told me when I got there, oh, she's doing this with somebody else, she's doing this, you'll never hear from her again. And I thought they might be right. But my story has a happy ending in terms of my family. That's not the case for most of the guys I was locked up with that I keep in touch with. Most people don't ride for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. And so thank you for the work you're doing to be a source of support and strength for men when they come home.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. And I just, we're running a little over, but I thought it might be if there's time for 1 or 2 questions. Are there any completely burning questions for
I would just like to ask Jeff, Michael Connolly from the Harlem Family Institute, how are you using all of this extraordinary material you have and your skills to move this whole thing forward?
And before you answer that, let's get the other question over here. You introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello. My name is Anthony. I'm moved by your story because although you were in a different state and things of that such nature, I also served 14 and a half years in prison. But you brought it home when you made the statement of having that cushion. A lot of us don't have that. But I was fortunate enough to be able to come home. I've been home now 15 years. I have a wife I've been married to 14 years. I have a wonderful church family, and I have a job, I have a roof over my head. There's a lot of guys that are coming home and they don't know that they can have this too. So my question to you would be, what would you do, or what would you say to those who you might be able to share that story with as far as cushion versus no cushion?
So, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Michael, for the questions. In the order that they were asked. Michael, where's your accent from?
I grew up in Australia.
Australia, okay. Do you know Bruce Western?
No.
Yeah, probably that guy writing some of the most important scholarship on mass incarceration is an Australian scholar who's at Harvard named Bruce Western. Encourage you to look at his stuff, he's fantastic. So what am I doing? So I teach courses on incarceration at the New School to very privileged graduate students who are, I want to spread the seed so that they go out and care about this stuff. I'm on the boards of 3 different organizations. One, which I should have mentioned, is called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program, and they go into Texas, 2 Texas prisons, and they have visiting executives from all over the world come in. They do an MBA level curriculum with about 300 prisoners a year, and they teach you how to write a full-length business plan. So every piece of a business plan that you write on the outside, you write there. And then if you've ever seen Shark Tank, like the business plan competition, then it culminates at the end of their 9 months where they do a pitch to executives from all over the world who potentially will invest in these companies. You know what the recidivism rate for the last 11 years of graduates is? 6%. And the kicker is that there are now, I think, 7 $1 million a year businesses started by guys who came out. They don't all start their own businesses, but many of them start one and then hire one of the others. So I'm on that board. I'm on a board of a company called American Prison Data Systems, which is trying to put a tablet with a full suite of educational and vocational training software in the hands of every prisoner in the country. I think in a decade, every prisoner is going to have a tablet all the time. And I want to try to make that happen in a way that's really educational as opposed to like security conscious. You know what I mean? Like where is he and what's he doing? Sure, that's going to be some element of it that's going to get wardens to allow them in, but I want to make sure they have a rich offering educationally as well. So, and then I speak, I speak to different audiences of employers and try to encourage employers. Basically, I try to say, look, you're looking for people with resilience. You say you're looking for people who are innovative. You say you're looking for people, with ingenuity. Like most of these guys, I was in the feds, and so like anyone who gets a federal drug conviction was doing pretty good at it, but the feds just leave it to the state, right? So these guys are pretty successful drug dealers. And I say, imagine if you went to work every day at, Honeywell, and instead of just having to sell things at Honeywell, you also had to worry that the people at GE might kill you. Plus, you couldn't tell anyone in your family what you were doing. Plus, the police were trying to arrest you and prevent you from selling your item every day. So imagine taking a normal job and then layering on all these obstacles. That's what these guys have succeeded at. So it would probably be a snap for them to just go sell something legal. So anyway, so I talked to a lot of employers who encourage them to hire people. So that's how I'm trying to make the most of my experience. And I wrote a book, which is called Mr. Smith Goes to Prison, which kind of gives the background on a lot of these stories and incorporates them into a lot of these policy debates, and then offers a set of prescriptions for what we can do, just concrete policies that we can enact to reduce recidivism and eliminate mass incarceration. What would I tell Anthony, guys that don't, so I didn't, let's flesh out your exact question. Some guys have a cushion, not many. Most guys come out and they're adrift, and they literally get like $20 for like bus fare and go in somewhere, where they have nothing except the people who are on the street when they come home. Many of whom they know or knew their relatives. So what would I tell those guys? I would tell them just, the first thing you should do when you come out, find an organization like this. In St. Louis, find the Father Support Center. Find one of these coalitions, and you will find there is a group in every city I've been to that's doing this work. Okay, but most guys, that's not what the prisons tell you when you go out. They don't say, here are these 3 different organizations doing this work in Owensboro, Kentucky, or in St. Louis, Missouri. They say, here's $20. Good luck. And so that really would be, from a concrete thing, very small, cost-free thing that I would do, the two things I would do, one very small and one very big, to make these changes in society is, number one, make sure that there is a connection to multiple organizations to give people a support network who have nothing when they come out.
Right.
And secondly, more broadly, we got to change the mentality of COs. And right now, COs, their mentality where I was locked up was expressed in a very simple statement that that one guy made to almost everyone leaving. He'd say, "Hey, see you in 6 months, shitbird." We, I think, should figure out a way to give stipends or bonuses. We should track people coming out, track releasees. If they don't reoffend for 3 years, then we should give bonuses to the COs in the last facility or 2 facilities where they were incarcerated. And if COs felt, instead of how they currently feel, which is like one guy would say to people, "Jackasses like you are how I know I'm always going to have a job." Instead of that, we should turn it on its head and say, you want to make more money? Then build these guys up instead of tearing them down.
Amen.
Thank you so much.